All right, welcome to episode 62 of Seize the Moment podcast. And today we welcome back a very special guest. We got Sulaiman Jenkins. He's the co-author of Life is Raw. And yeah, welcome Sulaiman. How you doing, man?
Appreciate it. Doing well, man. Doing well.
Hey, man, welcome back to the show. And so,
Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, man. And then, so kind of before we get into it, we wanted to catch up with you and ask you, since you and Mutah have obviously been recording the book in the studio, right? What's that been like, and how have you guys been doing that?
Yeah. Oh, that's been amazing, man. The project itself is sort of like taking on its own life. Writing it was one thing, and we always thought about doing the audiobook. Because we thought that it was going to be a different experience. It's very rare, I think, that you find authors and narrators of a book doing the same audiobook. Generally, they hire somebody to do voiceover. So I think this is going to be, he and I spoke about this a long time. We think that this is going to be one of the special attracting points of the audiobook is that it's actually going to be in, the protagonist's voice. And people are obviously attracted to Mutah because he was a former rap artist. So they like to hear his voice. And then I put my own narrating skills there. It's been cool. It's been very tiring. It's a lot more work than you would imagine. Reading the book. And even he himself said recording songs with Pac wasn't nearly this tiring. It's been very tiring. Yeah. We had to do quite a few sessions, but hopefully it'll be well worth it. You guys hear it.
Yeah. How many hours does that take? Is that like something where it's like you could do one take, or you have to read it a certain way, and then if you don't read it a certain way, you gotta.
Well, no, you can take when you're actually doing the process, you can mess up, have different takes, and then the I don't know what the name is, guest producer. They'll mix it up and master it and cut it all out. So, do all that stuff. So it's not, making mistakes is not a problem, but it's just the actual effort involved, man. It's going to be probably about, we're almost finished. We've already done 12 chapters. That's been 5.5 hours of recording time. Mm-hmm. 5.5 hours, man. So by the time it's all done, it's probably going to be about 7 hours of, nonstop, recording, which is, it's cool, but it's long.
I know somebody else who did a similar process to what you guys are doing, and I think it's a smart idea. You guys know who David Goggins is?
The name sounds familiar, but no.
He was like
not familiar.
He was like a former Marine SEAL. He used to be like back. He has big inspirational story. Like used to be like 300 pounds. Lost the weight like real fast. Joined the army. Was one of the first black people in the Marines to get through I forgot what it's called, buds, like the training that they do, and like in the audiobook, like he did a lot of it in his own voice too, with a co-author, just like how you guys are doing.
Sure.
And that added like such a like for me too, because it was in his voice and you could hear him and like it's about him. That drew me to the book. So I think
and what's so dope and what's so dope about like what
that's actually one.
Go ahead, man.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, what's so dope about like the process, the way that you guys framed the book. And I was actually telling a friend of mine, my friend Sky. So we were talking about how like, so her and I like frequently talk about like editing and sort of different ways to write books and kind of like how editors have their own sort of ways of structuring it. And so what was so cool about the way you guys made it was that like for you and, our audience, and when you guys get to read the book, is that like you structured it in different pieces, and where in each piece they would have a part that's yours and then a part that's Moo's. And so it would be like, let's say chapter 1 and then like part 1 of chapter 1, and it would be like you're telling of the story, and so it would have like academic references, and it would have pretty much like it would be told like a narration, and then Mutah would tell it from a first person perspective. And so what was cool is the way you guys kind of divided it up, and you could kind of get to see the perspective from an outsider's bird's eye view, and then you would see it from his perspective too, which was really cool.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I was, not for nothing, man, but that was the vision from before, because I wrote the whole thing, but Mutah, his voice was very important to, to have the narrations. And, we didn't really know how it was going to work But for me, as an author, it was very important to have his voice throughout, because that, like, I think we mentioned this last time, just adds a layer of authenticity, to the whole book. And we, I think, based on the reviews that we've gotten so far, I think we did that successfully. And it really came out when we were doing the recording, because it's like, we're going back and forth, and you got Moo who has his firsthand account of these things, and then you have me that comes behind it, as a narrator, and I have my narrating voice. I know how I want the book to sound because I wrote it, so, it's just an amazing process, man. It's a real, it's like the Kobe Shaq, Jordan Pippen, type collaboration, Magic and Kareem, it's serious.
Yeah.
It's serious, man. We're really excited, man, for the people.
Yeah. And the way you use like historical context in the terms of like what was going on in Mutah's life at the time and what was going on in the news, I thought that was great. And like how you're talking about like what Irvington was like for him growing up.
Right.
I didn't know it was like that. Like for me, I had like, at least from my knowledge, like you always knew like Leon always knew more about like Tupac and the Outlawz way more than me. I knew a bit, and of course respect all that, right? But then as I'm reading this book, I'm like, holy shit! Like he went through it. He had a crazy upbringing, And it was like, what was that movie? New Jack City. Yeah. There was parts where I'm reading in there where I was like, okay, whoa, this is like, this is some serious.
It's serious. It's serious. And that was also, again, that was again, from an author's perspective, that was critical for me, because as an author, you have to before you even sit down for a piece of writing, anything, academic, newspaper article, whatever, you have to imagine who's going to be reading your piece, right? Who is the audience? Who are you writing this towards? So I wanted to make the audience as broad as possible, because obviously, Mutah is African American, I'm African American. Yeah, he's Muslim. Yeah, I'm Muslim. Yeah, he's in rap. I listen to rap. But I wanted the book to reach more people, and that's not the only audience. His story is a human story at the end of the day, So I wanted to touch any human that could read it, regardless of race, color, creed, religion, whatever. And this is one of the things that was important to me, is that I had to imagine, okay, who are the readers that aren't familiar with Tupac? Who are the readers that aren't familiar with Black America? Who are the readers that aren't familiar with, the influence that Tupac had on Black America? Who are the readers that aren't familiar with the time, the 90s, you know what I mean? So all of those things, I sort of, had in my mind as I'm writing the script, to make sure that, whoever reads it, if you, like Biggie said, if you don't know now, you know. Like you didn't know before, but hopefully by the time you finish, you know it, and you have an appreciation. And for those people who do know, then at least they know the information, but there might be things that they didn't know, specifically. And at the very least, they just enjoy the literary ride. Hopefully, the writing style is, enjoyable enough, where it can be of benefit, even people who do know the story.
Right. And, something that I thought was a big focus, or one of the major focuses of the book, was that, often in our culture, kind of when people, how sort of our culture, I guess, or society is stratified, and we have like sort of people who live here and people who live there. And often sort of, especially in terms of the people who are against, obviously, the Black Lives Matter movement, where they would say something, oh, well, like, those kind of people in the ghettos, right? They're sort of destined to be like criminals or savages, or just, right. They're just meant to be like sort of terrible people, and we just kind of want to keep them over there. And so what I loved about this book is that, so obviously kind of it's become a cliche and I wrote about this in the review too. So where we think like a person's early environment is his destiny. So we think like, oh, well, if a person sort of grows up in tragedy, I mean, he's going to end up being that kind of person. Sort of the hate you give, right? Sort of obviously sort of becomes or perpetuates in the community, right? But that's not always necessarily true. And so even though obviously Mutah in the beginning had a difficult personality, which was unquestionable, the one thing you see throughout the book is his heart. So it's like as he grows up and as he matures and as he develops into the man that he was obviously meant to be, in the beginning you see like these little kernels of potential, right? It's like even though he was sort of wilding out and doing these crazy things, obviously, he also had a great heart. And then he was also great to his friends and he was loyal. And so then the story that stood out to me, man, oh my God, can't even believe he did this. When Corrupt came through, and this dude actually ended up taking the charge for him. I was like, who the hell does that? Like, that is loyalty to the max.
Yeah,
so sometimes people on the outside, they think like, oh, all of these people in the ghetto sort of like they're out there for themselves and they don't care about anybody else. So not fucking true, man. So it's like for Mutah, the way you kind of see it again. So obviously there were difficult parts to him, and definitely there were things that he did that I'm sure he regrets. But what you kind of see is that the development is that a person's no matter what hell they're going through, that person always has the potential to rise above it and become something greater. And so just to not kind of go off on a rant about it, but because I want to focus on this too, but whatever. This is the preliminary part of it. So remember, Saul, when we talked about the aspects of post-traumatic growth. So do you remember, like we talked about? Yeah. So what I kind of actually ended up doing, and I don't want to get into this like too much now, just because there's a lot here, and I want to kind of go through it step by step. So what I did is I actually picked out quotes from the book, and I pretty much like lined them up with the elements of post-traumatic growth. And what you actually see in the book is that Mutah actually meets all of the elements of post-traumatic growth. So like all of the solid elements, if you kind of look, if you look at the different quotes, you can actually see that he actually meets all of the elements. So what that does, and I think this is so important, is it challenges the idea that somebody who grows up in hell is just sort of destined to be, I don't know, let's say a savage or somebody who's kind of like, detrimental to the environment. So that's not true, man. You could kind of see when there's when there are interventions and when there are people who care about you, what happens is that no matter where you're from, man, that doesn't dictate who you become, at least not in the long run, or it doesn't have to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And one of the things too, man, about this point was, it was important for me, for people to see, that number one, a person might be a prisoner of circumstances and a prisoner of the environment, but, sometimes people are just put in those environments. Like for instance, his father was affluent before he was murdered. His father had no problems with money. Irvington was a thriving community before, the riots took place, before crack hit, so there's no telling, I mentioned this in the book, there's no telling that, had his father been alive with all that money, he probably would have moved him out of that neighborhood. And then, Mutah Beale would have been a completely different person, you know what I mean? Because, he wouldn't have had to, he wouldn't have been in an environment where there's crack around, wouldn't have been as dangerous. He may not even have met the people that he met, so, everything happens for a reason. And the thing is, as you mentioned, just because he, Irvington ended up changing to become sort of a destitute, environment, very dangerous. It wasn't always like that. And he had no choice but to grow up in the environment that he was in. But he didn't become a prisoner of the environment. I mean, he was affected, and that's you clearly see that throughout, even to this day. Irvington is a very substantial part of his makeup, who he is as a person. But he was able to leave, what was negative, and he was able to turn himself around. That's really a powerful story. For anybody who sort of, find themselves in that, situation where they think they can't get out. There are ways to get out. You might be in, a prison of circumstances, but there are ways out. You're not doomed and destined to be there.
Right. Yeah. And for him, it was a challenge, right? When he got to LA the first time, not the first time, but when he got out there, and this is when he started making real money with, I forgot that company,
Interscope?
Interscope. There you go. And
Interscope,
they flew him out there. You see he sees how beautiful it is over there. And like, he recognizes the beauty, but at the same time, he's like, I'm not used to this.
Yeah.
Like, I'm from Irvington, and like, he felt more comfortable when he was in the recording studio with the guys with the strap, guns and stuff like that. He's like, actually, this feels like home,
Yeah.
And obviously that was early on. Of course, he changes more and more, but like, it's not easy, right? Like, what did he say? You could take the man out the hood, but you can't take the hood out of the man.
Yeah, you can't take the hood out the man. Exactly.
Yeah. I was like, what?
Yeah. Does he still feel that? Does he still feel that way? Like, does he still feel like there's some remnant of Irvington in him?
Absolutely, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely, man. I mean, not for nothing, but there was one, of all the reviewers, one of their comments was that, the references, too many references to Irvington. And, he was the only person that said this. Everybody else, they thought it was fine. But I had to, he's like, because we know what the hood is and this and this and that. And it's like, yeah, for you, you might know what the hood is, but other people may not know what the hood is, and they may not know how much a person is attached, to this place that they've grown up. Irvington is very much a part of who, Mutah is. And he, that was something that came out to me in this whole ride, this whole project, is that he loves Irvington. He might have gone to LA, Atlanta and things like that, but Irvington is a staple of who is just very much like Brooklyn is a part of me. Like my blood type is BK,
That's what's up. That's what's up.
It's just a part of you, and it makes you, and there's nothing wrong with loving where you grew up in, and it's just, I think it's just a human, it's just a human thing. Obviously, he says he probably would never go back there to live and things like that just because it's dangerous, but it is a key part of his identity,
Yeah. So something that someone asked me, I think maybe even a few people asked me. So when they read my book review, they asked me like, so I didn't focus on it too much because I kind of wanted the book to speak for itself, but I do actually want to bring it into the podcast. So someone asked me, so this was the part where I mentioned about like, so I said something along the lines of, so I said that Mutah's life was essentially a combination of like, tragedy and sort of triumph or something along those lines. And then Islam was the tipping point. And someone was like, oh, but what did that mean? Like, how did Islam sort of help him? So I actually wanted to bring that into the podcast and ask you, so can you tell us about sort of Mutah's transformation and how kind of like what the steps were for what sort of like what's the word what sort of sparked his interest in Islam and how did it kind of help him become the man that he is?
Yeah, I mean, you got to understand too, the book is 16 chapters, right? Mm-hmm. And we don't even mention Islam until chapter 15, so you have 14 chapters of just a crazy life. So you can do the math yourself and see if the man that you see now, what was it that was that powerful to ground this man? He was known as being just a wild, just out of control. Even himself, he'd say, I was just wild. I was just, I was just out of control. I was lost, and, when people get like that, they're just out of control. He was, it got to a point where I wouldn't say he pushed the panic mode, but he pushed the he got into survival mode, basically feeling that if he didn't find something powerful, he was going to either kill somebody or he was going to kill himself. He got that drastic. So he was hitting basically the panic button, looking for something, to ground him. He traveled to Puerto Rico, he did this, he did that. But it just so happened, it's the chapter 16 is called Peace Found Me, because he was looking for something, but he didn't know it was going to be Islam. Yeah. He didn't know there was going to be spirituality. And, he ended up meeting somebody. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but he ended up meeting somebody. And that person, in a very subtle way, basically invited him to a mosque one day. And
in a cool way, too.
Yeah, in a very cool way, yeah. And he, up until that point, Mutah really had a negative association with Muslims, which is amazing because, he's Muslim. He was born Muslim, So his entire life, he associated Muslims with murdering his parents. So he had a strong aversion to Islam, just associated with that, So when the person invited him to the mosque, his first reaction was, why am I going to deal with Muslims? They killed my parents. But he was able to push that, aside and then go to the mosque with like 20 or 30 dudes strapped up, he doesn't know who this dude is. He doesn't know where, but he was just surprised at the level of happiness, genuineness, sincerity, the amount of love that he received from these strangers. And from that point on, that piqued his interest, like how are these in the middle of LA? How are these people so nice and cool? And all he knows is violence and guns and, drinking and stuff like that. So it was a profound effect from that one time he went to the mosque. And then after that, the rest is history. He piqued his interest. He started reading more and more until, he finds, for him, he was like, this is what I've been looking for my entire life, and then that was it. So it was sort of, he was looking for something he didn't know was going to be Islam, but it ended up being the one thing that, his life was a whirlwind, and it ended up being the mountain that sort of stabilized everything for him.
Yeah.
Do you feel like what happened between him and his brother Mill was
Yeah,
like a bottom for him, in a way, like it pushed him to
big
be
time.
like, okay, I gotta stop like
Yeah, big time.
living in
As I
this.
mentioned, it got to a point where he was like, either I'm gonna kill somebody, because that's the other thing too, that I'm not gonna get into too much detail. But the other thing too is that up until the point he gets with his brother, he's been exposed to death, but it's never been by his hands. You see what I'm saying? So he's witnessed death. Death has happened to so many people around him, but he himself has never killed anybody until that one incident when he's very close to killing somebody close to him, and then he's like, you know what, this is getting out of control. So he was already, the abuse that he was going through alcohol wise, the emotional and mental trauma from losing so many people. He was ready to kill himself. He said this on a number of occasions. He didn't want to live. What was the purpose of living if everybody was dying all over the place? And then so he already had that feeling of killing himself, and then he got so violent with his brother at one time, that it almost led to death. So, he sees himself at a crossroads. Either I'm going to kill somebody because I have so much rage, or I'm going to kill myself because I'm just so depressed and things like that. And then it was at that point, he's like, look, I have to do something. I got to do something, man. It was just.
Yeah, so it was at that point, for me as a reader, right, when I was reading that part, where I connected like a lot with him. There was this point where, I mean, I wouldn't say I had the same exact thing, but I think that's something that a lot of people go through when they make a serious change in their life, where they say to themselves like, this is enough. Like, I'm not like this thing I just did, or this way I impacted that person, or like this damage I did. I'm not gonna deal with this anymore. Like I need to do something different.
Tap out.
Yeah, exactly. And
and drastic.
Yeah, yeah. And it's like something that it's so relatable. Like I could feel like anybody reading even just that part, and not even obviously the rest of the book too, but that particular part, that one like struck a chord, Yeah.
That's what's up. That's what's up.
And
I'm glad to hear that, man, because good.
No, go for it, man.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, man, because like I said, man, honestly, I want the book to be something that, anybody can come to it and be able to relate to some aspect of it, because at the end of the day, like I said, it's a human story, not for nothing is, and I'll let you go, Leon. There was this British scholar. His name is Robert Lowe. He's very well known in terms of English language teaching, and published for Oxford, Cambridge, things like that. He ended up, and he's a white guy. Has nothing to do with POC, living in the hood, Black American, whatever. He read the book, and he was like, "Wow!" He's like, "I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, but it was really, just an interesting read. I can't put it down." And he was able to find value in what he was reading, and that for me is important as an author, because again, I wanted to touch everybody who reads. I want you to be able to find something in there, that says, oh wow, that could be me. And so what it does is it makes Mutah a relatable person. It doesn't matter who you are, you can relate to you can relate to him, relate to his story, and that's important.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And so, and just to kind of, before I say what I was going to say, just to point this out. So that's an aspect called spiritual growth, an aspect of post-traumatic growth. So that's sort of one of the facets where we could say, oh, like, so Mutah embodied, post-traumatic growth. So I want to kind of, like, as we go along, to touch on the different elements of it. So what I was going to also say is that essentially that when I was reading a story, right, kind of piggybacking on what Alan said. So, I mean, I guess fortunately or unfortunately, Mutah's early life, well, let me actually say this. His early behaviors were a lot like my early behaviors. So I used to get into like random altercations with people. I was a super angry kid. I would constantly get into trouble, and like in school, especially, like there was a time where I got not suspended, but they would like kick me out at random times for like just being a class clown and acting up. But then like my friends would always give me shit because I would get drunk and become belligerent and kind of like ruin relationships with people. And I remember reading that and I was like, man, it's like, if there's hope for this person, right? It's like, I honestly, and I wish I read that story before, because there was a time when I felt like this was it. I was like I'm stuck in my personality. Like the person I am is just not something I'm able to overcome. I mean,
We are,
fortunately, like I had kind of the
right.
mentors and the friends and the teachers to help me out of it. But I mean, honestly, I wish I had that kind of book or that story back, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Because for me, my thinking is, it's like if I had like a blueprint to
That's
say, like,
tough.
here's this person who was almost exactly like you, right? And who felt the exact same way, who felt hopeless, who felt
Right.
like nobody was going to love him, who felt like that even if he does love somebody, he's going to end up losing them. Like my father ended
Right.
up sort of leaving our family early. So I thought the same way
Right.
too. And who
Right.
felt like honestly his only way was like to interact with the world was aggression. And I was like, damn, man, if I had a
Right.
story like that and if I had a blueprint for somebody to show, like, no, man, like you can get out of this. Like, again, your environment and even your character is not necessarily your destiny. So, I mean, that would have
Right.
been a big help for me. And so, what my hope is that, like, in writing this book and obviously in putting the book out there, is that even as much as it touches, like, let's say academics and sort of adults and kind of people our age, I honestly also hope it reaches like teenagers, man, like teenagers and sort of maybe even preteens. So
Yeah.
people who
Absolutely.
grow, yeah, so
Absolutely.
people who kind of grow up in those
Absolutely.
environments and grow up with those kind of characters and feel like this is it, man. Like I'm stuck in this place and I don't think I'm ever gonna get out.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the things too. Is this book only accounts for the first 23 years of Mutah's life. So all of this stuff happens, and he's basically a baby. We have a second part to a second book that will be coming out. Hopefully next year, when we talk about okay, now he's lived in Saudi, and he's a American, different country. How does he navigate between both worlds?
Yeah.
We pick up on stories that were sort of hung up in the first book, and then we continue those. So, but yeah, I mean, yeah, the book essentially, yeah, if you're a teenager, yeah, you're definitely going to be relating to a lot of things that that he went through. I mean, in many ways, Mutah had to grow up before his time, so a lot of the things that he deals with are very adult things, at an early age, but at the same time, he's still a child. He's still a child, still a teenager. So yeah, I definitely hope that it reaches that that audience.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what's cool too is, I mean, this is kind of hidden in the book. It's not the main
Yeah,
point, but one thing that I noticed is you kind of learn some entrepreneurial kind of skills while
right,
reading it. Like, for example, like how connections to other people are
Mhm.
really important,
right,
right?
right, 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 right,
Also, being fiercely loyal.
right.
And like things like that, and there were like little things like kind of I picked up on as I'm reading where I was like,
True,
oh, okay, like it makes you want to kind of copy certain things that
sure,
he did. Yeah.
sure, sure, sure. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I really, man, not for nothing, man. It's almost 90,000 words. I literally chose every single word carefully. You know what I mean? And anything you see there is not unintentional. It's all there. You know what I mean? To
Yeah.
give you more than what when a person comes and say, "Oh, I'm going to read the story of Mutah." Yeah, you're going to read the story of Mutah, but you're going to get hopefully so much more. Hopefully life lessons. You know, business lessons, like you said, academic lessons. What else? In musical history,
Yep.
cultural history. I hope you're going to get all that stuff. So I hope that it's going to be much more than what what the person expects, and then that they can take again they can take away many different things.
Yeah, and that's
But the
another
fact that you said that, I'm happy.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
And that's another element of post-traumatic growth, right? Strengthening closer relationships, pretty much. And so the other part of it that I felt super connected to was that part, that pretty much the point of the book where he ended up going into the mosque. And, like we talk about, like, kind of he came in there with like sort of with guns and with sort of people. And,
Yeah,
he was like, oh, what does
yeah,
this guy want from me? And so kind of
right,
and this is one of those big elements where I kind of related to, because so a lot of us who come from these different backgrounds, we have really sort of a difficult time trusting love and accepting it.
right,
So for me
right,
and him, right, the way we kind of see or so at least the way we saw the world. I mean, hopefully for me, I don't know if I changed that much. So the way we
right,
kind of see the world is that, like, who is this person like who's trying to give you love? Like, what do they want? Like, why is it that they're
exactly,
doing this? What's their sort of motive?
exactly,
Is there something that they're
exactly,
trying to sort of trick me into? So the way he kind of saw it was like, oh, okay, like, look, I'll give you a chance, but I'm going to bring in everybody else just in case you do try to mess with me in some way.
exactly, exactly,
So it's
exactly.
like for us, man, like the people who've gone through like any sort of trauma, regardless of kind of, I guess, what it is, well, I mean, interpersonal trauma. So regardless of what it is, we find it hard to trust people. And so for Mutah, man, the part of his life that was like, at least to me, the most important was the relationships, was just for the simple fact that it seemed like there were only a few people that he was able to trust from the get-go. Obviously, like his family, and then like Pac, who was obviously like his important figure in his life. But then like for the most part, I mean, it kind of seemed like he felt like it was him against the world. And I was like, oh man, yeah, that's pretty much how I felt. I had like this core group of people in my life, and then everybody else was like somewhat of an enemy, right? If not like in actuality, at least in potential. So what I loved about it is that it's like, and not to sort of get into this too much, obviously, because we do hope people read the book, but the point is that you kind of see that for Mutah, what he does is his circle goes from being pretty much this big to being this big. And so the love that he sort of accepts at some point, right, eventually expands to the love that he gives. And what's so cool about this, it becomes, it's a virtuous cycle where it goes from like, here I am, right, and I love these few people, and here's maybe this other person somewhere on the outside that wants to show me love, and then finally I accept it and I give him love, and then like, oh, here are these other people that are giving me love, and then the circle kind of expands, and then you're like, wow, man, he actually turned into somebody who's kind of like a sage, somebody who sort of put in this positive vibe out into the world, and who's showing like, man, like even if you sort of haven't had love at an early age, that doesn't mean you can't transform into a person who's able to give love even to strangers.
Exactly. It's deep. And, you know, I mean, yeah, not for nothing. I mean, you know, he had a lot of love to give. I myself have a lot of love to give. Pac had a lot of love to give. You know, there's a lot of people who have a lot of love to give, but, you know, certain circumstances, you know, change you. So, you know, I think he's always been this person. He's always been this person that has nothing to, you know, but love to give. And the same thing, I think I mentioned it in the book with Pac, you know, he was like that, but because of what happened to him and the, you know, the suffering that he had to be more judicious in who he gave the love out to, you know. And that's, you know, that's an unfortunate position to find yourself in when you do have nothing but love to give everybody. But, you know, at the same time, you know, you can't expose yourself to danger, you know. And that was something that, you know, I think Pac found himself doing. And also, you know, and then that became clear with the whole, you know, his legal ordeals and things like that. With Mutah, the same thing, you know. But it wasn't until he, you know, became spiritual and found this sort of brotherhood, you know, that's real, you know, where he can really, you know, not for nothing, man, but him and Saudi, I mean, he's very well known in Saudi, you know, and it's amazing where, you know, people just go to his coffee shop and they know that they can, you know, just go up to him and say, what's up? You know, he's not gonna be standoffish. You know, he's a very approachable person, you know, and, you know, I think that's just part of his character to just show, you know, a lot of love. But again, you know, depending on what kind of environment you grow up in, you know, it depends on how free you are to give that, you know, or not. And, you know, in some cases where you just, you know, where the environment itself is just, you know, disloyal, betrayal all over the place, you become skeptical. And I think that's just, you know, that's just a natural way to look at things. But yeah, when you are free to just, you know, have love for everybody and receive the same thing, you know, it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, I also like how you showed how Tupac was like in the beginning, like when Mu first met him.
Yeah.
Like how he was beaming smile, you know, really welcoming, very real guy, willing to, like the way he sat him down to listen to Mu's story, you know, like what happened to him and all that. That was a very, like the way you wrote it too is a very, I don't know how to, it's like I had a different feeling in me. I was like, whoa, okay, like this is a moment to be serious and like, you know, it's like, it's as if you're like talking to your family or something like that, saying something really important that happened to you. And like, yeah, and then you see like Pac changes in phases, right? Like then, I mean, this is not then, a lot of stuff happens, but when he gets shot the first time and then goes to jail, and then like he starts to show like kind of like a darker side to him, like you said, like more judicious. But also it's very interesting too, like the kind of books that he was reading, like Art of War or The Prince.
Machiavelli. The Prince.
Yeah, and like
I mean, that was also.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it was important. Like I said, you know, there's a lot of opportunities. I told us from the beginning, it's not just going to be about, you know, your life. There's just too many things to talk about. And one of the things that was important for me was, you know, for a lot of people, myself included, you know, Um, just to sort of give a different perspective on Pac, that, number one, he's vilified by the media always as a thug, and, somebody who's, not intelligent or anything, and it couldn't be not compassionate. It couldn't be anything further from the truth. The dude was highly intelligent, very compassionate. And the thing is that, people, I think he's widely misunderstood, and that might be intentional from the media or whatever. But one of the things that was important was to show how he transformed. He became Machiavelli, Machiavelli the Don towards the end of his career for a reason. He didn't begin like that. He was very socially conscious. Keep your head up, dear mama. Brenda's got a baby. Showing nothing but love. But at the same time, it wasn't white people or white police officers who shot him. It was his own people. It wasn't a white female or that got him in jail. It was a black female. So he's saying all these songs talking about uplifting his own people, and at the end of the day, he was done wrong by them. So that's when he sort of became like, look, now it's all about me. It's all about self. I could care less about, what I mean? I mean, he still, carries socially conscious messages, towards his later songs, but you could tell that he became a monster, basically. He became, darker and unapologetic, and you may not necessarily agree with it, but at least you can understand how he got there.
And so, like, one of the saddest aspects of Pac's story was, I think it was sometime in 1996 when they did the Second Millionaire March, and the expectation was that him and Suge were going to be up there, like, or they were going to deliver a speech or at least be there in some form. And like, Pac was at Rodeo Drive shopping, and it's like, damn, man, I can't believe this is what happened. Like, you would never expect that from someone like him. I mean, look, I'm not judging him, obviously. I mean, I'm sure he had whatever reason to do that, but like, the thinking is like, oh my God, man, like at that point he was so needed at that place, and it's like, here he is shopping instead.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's sad. And then at the end of the day, too, you got to understand, he's in his 20s. He's in his early 20s, mid-20s. So, he's got a lot of things going. He's still developing as a man, and, one of the things is that, look, if somebody comes at you or you feel like you're victimized by people, you're going to stand up for yourself. It's time to, you're going to stand up for yourself. And that's basically, what I felt like he was doing. He was standing up for himself and basically like letting people like, no, don't try me. It's not, unfortunately, guys, you changed me. You created a monster. So, that's what people got to see towards the end of his career.
Yeah, and that reminds me of, go ahead.
Oh, yeah? No, go for it. My thing is like a one little point thing. You're probably going to go into something.
Okay. Yeah. I was going to say, so I was watching, I forgot what show he was on. So the rapper Richie Rich, he was doing an interview pretty much about like his music career and like his sort of relationship with Pac. And so he was talking about like Pac's pretty much childhood naivety in the beginning, where he's like, yo, Pac loved everybody, man. He's like, there were times where some of the older dudes were like, yo, dude, you can't like accept everyone. He's like, it's not possible. And Pac would like bring in some random dude. He'd be like, oh, that's my brother. Or like, that's my sister. Like, that's my homie. I love these people. So at the beginning, it was like, yo, Pac showed love to everybody. And Richie Rich is like, yo, man, you can't do that. Because you can't just bring in random people. Like, because you don't know what they're about. Like, you don't know what they want from you. But to Pac, it was like, no, man. He's like, these people love me and I love them back. And then you kind of see this transformation, which sucked, obviously, because he went from sort of generally loving everybody to then sort of almost generally hating everybody. And so, I mean, you wish, like, looking back on his life, that he was able to find some middle ground in between. And, like, especially with the relationship that he had with Biggie, man. Like, that's one of those things, man, like, you really wish that there was some way for them to have, like, settled it, obviously, before it escalated to that point.
Right. I mean, Alan.
Oh no, yeah. Honestly, yeah. Given more time, if Pac had the time, who knows? Like, in what other ways he would have changed? What other kind of perspectives he would have? Who he would be like today?
Right.
One thing I wanted to say from before is I like how he came up with the names for the Outlaws.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I was like, oh, okay, that's why Napoleon is Napoleon. That's why Gaddafi is Gaddafi. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's cool.
All those sort of, those little sort of historical things, things that I didn't know myself. These are like the nuggets, the jewels that are all throughout the book. To get, the thing is too is Mutah had quite a close relationship with Pac. So there's a lot of things that he'll be able to, and he does. He goes into the book that people just don't know. It's not, it's not general information. So that's one of the things that, I hope is a drawing factor, to read the book. Yeah.
One thing that I also really
I was
like
gonna
that
say
you
something
did.
else.
It'll come back. It'll come back.
So,
It's an episode.
The thing that I really liked
Yeah.
is there's certain characters. So I won't say it in too much detail. This is to, draw people to read it. So, but
sure.
I'll say this, the way you mentioned certain people's names in Moo's life, right? That when he started first meeting them and all that, and then who they actually became later, and like their actual, music names and stuff like that. That was interesting to see. Like there was
right.
yeah, there were some characters that I was like, oh, like the whole time he was gonna be like, I didn't know that was somebody famous, or something like that. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's cool.
Like the Queen Latifah story. Yeah, that was
one of the things we could talk about. Yeah, I was just about to say.
yeah.
Yeah, like that. Yeah, that's and it's amazing. Dana Owens. Anybody who knows her real name, be like, oh, well, time out. And if you don't know, then you're like, okay, Dana Owens, blah blah blah, and then like I said, she would have to leave the Friends because she had to pursue a rap career as Queen Latifah. And people are like, oh snap, maybe people don't even know that Mutah and Queen Latifah grew up together. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of things like that people just they're not going to know unless they read the book. So that's cool.
Yeah, or Yafeu, right? If I'm saying his name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I didn't know until way later who he was, and I was like, oh, okay, wow, all right.
Well, that's the thing too. That's the thing that surprised me. Like I said, I grew up, loving Pac and Outlawz and knowing quite a lot about them. But the one thing that I didn't realize while I was talking to Mutah throughout the whole process is how familial they were. They were really like family. You know what I'm saying? They went way, 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 way back before there was anything. Before it was Tupac, before it was the Outlawz. They were family. And that's something that's really, for me, that's something that's really special about their relationship, and it explains everything, just about how close they were. Because I always thought that there was just some random dudes who came together as a group, and I was like, wow, they really, they came together and they really got love for each other. You know what I'm saying? For me, that was kind of weird because I'm like, wow, okay, that's all these dudes have they want nothing but love. They got nothing but love for each other, and they want everybody to shine and stuff like that. But then when you really understand, no, it's family. You know what I mean? So that's what you saw on stage. That's what you saw and how they dealt with each other. It really was family. Everybody's moms knew each other. Castro's mom and Pac's mom were sisters. So they're actually blood cousins that I didn't know. So like all these little things, man. It's gonna be interesting for the real, diehard, Outlaw fans and Pac fans to learn.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what was dope was like kind of touching, just going back to the image of the Outlawz, was that he even had Storm in there. So for those of you guys who kind of don't know, Storm was actually one of the early female gangster rappers. And So like even though Queen Latifah obviously was sort of, and she came around, I think she became popular probably 4 or 5 years before like Storm was a hit, and the Lady of Rage, right, the other sort of death row artist. So, but the point was like even though Queen Latifah was popular at the time, like she had a socially conscious message. So it was more about like female empowerment, feminism, sort of social rights issues, whereas Storm was like a straight up gangster rapper, man. I mean, she was like, yeah. And Pac was like, I mean, like, obviously I don't know enough about their relationship to say, but the point is that like Pac loved her, obviously, it seemed like, and he kind of brought her in. And honestly, man, like she was one of the dopest artists I've ever encountered. And what's shocking to me is that, and what's shocking to me is that like she actually didn't sort of become more prolific or more famous than she did.
Right. Yeah, she's cool, man. I was able to interview her for the book, and that was one of the main, one of the things that was important at the same time. It was, it was cool for me. It was to talk to all these people that, to get their firsthand account, because again, that to me, it just raises the authenticity of the book. And Storm was one of them, and she, we try to shout her out as much as we could, in the book. It's amazing. They all have basically the same synopsis of who Mutah was. He was just a wild dude. He was a wild dude who was raw and real and wasn't afraid, of anything. And they were all, pretty much shocked to see this transformation that he made.
Yeah. I mean, what does he think about his music career now? I know he's obviously transitioned into poetry and obviously into, writing at this point. And but like, does he still at some point like look back on his career with fondness?
He, it served a purpose. It had his time. He was actually going to, before he just left it all together, he was going to put out a record that was going to be what he called cleaned up, music. Really wasn't going to talk too much about like, drugs and stuff like that. And he produced with I think Johnny J.
Right.
And Mike Epps was there as well, and he was, listening to it and everything. And, they all thought that was his best music. That was the best, his best production. He sort of left it on the table. So, I think he'll always have, an affinity for writing rhymes and lyrics, things, things like that, but obviously without the music. But, I think he's sort of transitioned into poetry. So I think he's going to take, poetry up to be a, again, that sort of therapeutic outlet that rap was, and he could still, achieve some of the things that he wanted to achieve through, rap. It just would be, without accompanying musical instruments. And, he has, as you saw, he has an intro poem for the book. He has an outro poem for the book. And it's still it shows he still got it. He hasn't lost anything, So I think, poetry and putting rhyme to words is always going to be a part of his, so it's just who he is. He'll never, I don't think that'll ever go away.
Yeah, man. And so one of my favorite songs of his that I still like listen to this day, pretty, I guess a lot. So the song that he did with Johnny J and Val Young, Never Forget. So for those of you guys who don't know, so he actually made a video for it too. And it's a letter to Pac. So the reason why it's called Never Forget, it's pretty much he's saying that we'll never forget everything you did and sort of the influence that you had on us. And what's so dope about that song is Mu actually ended up taking all of Pac's hits. He put them together into these rhymes, and he would like pretty much, yeah. So he would say like, remember Brenda? Oh yeah, she had another baby. Oh yeah, that rose from the concrete, it did grow. So like pretty much he takes like all of his songs and he's like giving him a letter, kind of giving him an update on like how the sort of mythical people in these songs are doing, and then he updated him on how the Outlawz are doing and how he's doing, and then Val Young sings the hook for that song. I love that song, man.
That's what's up.
Yeah, and it's like it's interesting. I think that was the last thing he did, right? That was like part of that last album that never came out.
I'm not sure. I can't. Yeah, I don't know the. Yeah, I stopped listening, man, like 2001, 2002. So that his last album, I don't even know. I don't know much about it. I'd have to ask him.
Yeah, because I think the video came out in 2003, and it seemed like from the chronology in your book that was pretty much when he called it quits.
Yeah, yep, 2002, 2003, yep.
Yeah. And that was. Go ahead.
One thing, so when he actually converted to Islam, right, and he started to read scripture and started to like understand like more about like his relationship to drinking, right, and then trying to detach himself from that. So I like how it was a very real look at what it's like to kind of get out of drinking, because it wasn't 1, 2, 3. It took him like it looked like it like a couple of years after he started practicing. I mean, I guess I won't go into too much details about his like first fast, but like as you could see, like as he started learning more about the religion and like what he had to do to really get that spiritual side of him taken care of. I gotta say, I really respect like how he went through the whole process. It's not easy. Not a lot of people get out, and the fact that he was able to, that's just also a very inspiring thing,
Appreciate it, man. Appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, that was, again, like I said, we have many different audiences, and one of the audiences that's targeted is people who struggle with substance abuse and alcohol abuse, and that you might find yourself in a position where you just feel like you can't make it, but it's nobody changes overnight, and that was what was important for us to mention in the book, is that I mean, he had a huge drinking problem that you see evolve throughout the book, and he wasn't able to stop it cold turkey, but he resolved to. He saw the ill effects of it, and at some point gradually he was able to kick it, and so at the end of the day, like I said, people who struggle, hopefully they can have sort of roadmaps and blueprints, as you mentioned, to try to achieve the things that they would like to achieve.
Yeah, and I think one of the most important aspects of the book is when you guys characterize this drinking as something that was more of a habit than something that brought him joy. So often the misconception is that people who
Yeah,
struggle
yeah,
with any sort of substance use, whether alcohol, any sort of drug,
right,
what people think is that like, oh, well,
right,
what these people are doing is they're actually enjoying their lives, right? So it's like they're sabotaging their lives
right,
and they're hurting other
right,
people, but they're actually like spent most of the time in
right,
joy, like they're in
Mhm.
ecstasy. And so it's actually not true.
right,
So when it
right,
comes to
right,
substances, right,
right.
initially, right, there's obviously the high, especially even with alcohol. But when it kind of the person
Sure,
goes down the line,
sure.
and I could tell you, by the way, I like struggled with alcoholism at some point in my life too. I mean, there was a point when I was a heavy
Sure.
drinker, and I could tell you, man, like somewhere down the line, I think probably 2 years into it, I didn't even enjoy drinking. There were times where
Right.
like all of us were hanging out and getting drunk, and I was like, "This is fucking boring. Like, there's nothing good is coming up this." You know, and then it's like, and for people, they sometimes think like, oh, these people, like these, substance abusers or alcoholics, like they're so selfish instead of taking on their
Sure.
responsibilities, like they're just off having fun. And the great
Sure.
point, or one of the great points of the story was that you guys painted the picture of Buddha actually kind of suffering with alcoholism. And even
Yeah.
though he knew on the one hand that it wasn't the thing to do because it was obviously ruining his life, on the other hand, he didn't know how to sort of just put it down, obviously. And that's the
Exactly.
epitome of what it means to be an alcoholic.
Exactly.
No
Exactly.
alcohol, let me not generalize, but most alcoholics do not think of it and think of waking up every day and it's like, oh man, it's 7 a.m. I'm going to go get drunk right now. It's not
Exactly.
like,
Exactly.
yeah. So they pretty
Exactly.
much, it's a wake up and then it's like, oh shit, now I got to do this to get me through the day. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. He's a creature of habit, So,
Yeah.
just Yep.
Yeah, I like how whatchamacallit, after being introduced to Islam, and then it like even changed his relationship to drinking in the beginning. Like
Right.
I forgot what the line was exactly, but it was
Yeah.
something that basically said that he before he was drinking all day, or he
Mm-hmm.
drank not to have fun. I forgot what it was, but it's pretty much at one point he's like, actually now I just drink because it's a habit, and like
Right.
I just feel like I need to, something like
Right.
that.
Right. Right.
And then so even seeing that was good. It's like it was like one step into like the way out of that. So
Right.
that
Right.
was
Right.
interesting to
Right.
see too.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, throughout the whole time, he's very aware of who he is and what he's becoming and what he's not becoming, what he's doing, what he's not doing. So I mean that is also kudos to him, and it's also again a testament to his character. That, and a lot of people too, they go through this. Like for instance, I'm from Brooklyn, and you'll find a lot of people in Brooklyn. He might be a drug dealer, he might be whatever, but he'll tell you straight up, I know this is not right. I know what I'm doing is not right. I'm just
Mhm.
doing it because I can't eat. I don't have any other. I can't find any other way to pay my bills. And it's this sort of what's the word? Um, realness, but it's just this sort of honesty with yourself, and what you're doing, and the self-reflection of what you're doing. I think that was a major part of him, being able to transform as well, because he was always in tune with, who he was, what he wanted, what was going on. And some people don't do that. Some people like to gloss over, like if they have an alcohol problem, say, I don't have a problem, when you really do, or if I remember back in college, I have my own battles with alcohols and stuff like that. But we'd be in college, and these guys would be like, oh man, this is the best stuff we're doing on earth, and then you feel awful the next day, and I'm like, dude, this is not the best. I mean, come on, man, let's be real. This is not, you feel like garbage, the next day. So let's not be real that this is the greatest thing on earth when it's not. So that's the thing, is that some people, they ignore the reality, and they create this fantasy world, and rather than puncture that bubble and face reality, they just continue to live it in it for the rest of their life, and that's sad, because these type of people, they never get out of situations they're in. Mutah wasn't like that. He recognized the situations he was in, called it for what it was, and then found ways to navigate it. So I think that's an important part also of finding solutions, is just being real with yourself, being real with the situation you're in.
Yeah. And so that reminds me of my favorite metaphor in the book. So
Okay.
before I get into it, so I just want to say with the alcoholism. So what I kind of figured out at some point, like when I was like drinking heavily, is that alcohol is actually a substitute for love. Because the way I kind of sort of, I guess, conceptualized it was, in my mind, when I was really drunk, I really felt like sort of this aura of love around me. And I was like, oh man, like I feel so good right now. Like, the dopamine is sort of flowing in your brain and you're feeling like, like you're magical, right? And you feel like sort of the whole world loves you. And so that reminded me of this metaphor that you had. I don't remember it verbatim, but it was pretty much from who ended up putting his head and bowing down on the mat, on the rug. And then so essentially, he felt, he pretty much felt the power of Islam, or the power of the love in the mosque. He kind of felt it flow through him. And I was like, damn, man, like that's it. That's what people feel when they're drinking. Like they feel like honestly their whole body is just full of love. And Bermuda ended up, I think why it was such a kind of an important pivotal point, I guess, for him, was when he kind of bowed on that rug and he felt sort of God's, I guess, embrace, right? In his mind, he was like, my sort of conception. In his mind, he was probably thinking like, damn, man, like this is it. Like, I don't need alcohol anymore, at least not in the way I used to. So, but with people, when we're, as I guess, as therapists or as, substance abuse counselors, when we're trying to get people to stop drinking or stop using drugs, we often fail to find appropriate substitutes for them, like healthy relationships. So sometimes people are like, oh, well, here's what you could do instead of drinking, right? You could kind of go do this instead or that. But the point is that the alcohol or the drugs, they're pretty much substitute for love. So if this person can't accept love, they're not going to give up drinking. Drinking is itself its own relationship. And that's something that I think like a lot of people don't get. If you're in a relationship with alcohol, the alcohol, even though it doesn't obviously talk back to you, it makes you feel a great sense of warmth and affection. So it's like when you drink it, you're like, oh man, I feel complete right now. And that's what was so cool about that metaphor, because it felt like Mutah sort of pivoted and substituted that alcohol, or that sort of, I guess, the glow or the high of alcohol. He substituted it with the warmth he felt in that mosque.
Right. Well, that's the thing, is that, you nailed it on the head. Alcohol it's a temporary escape. It's a false escape, right? And for that hour, the hours that you're, drunk, whatever, yeah, you temporarily feel great, but then when that high is done, when your buzz is finished and you come back to reality, then, reality hits you. And so now you become in a vicious cycle where you're always looking for that escape. And that escape will always be temporary. It'll always be temporary. So you're chasing something, you're chasing an escape it's never going to fulfill you, because it's only temporary. Whereas for, Mutah, when he went to the mosque, that was a real escape. It was an escape that he was able to, give himself up, in the way he described, give himself up, give all his worries, basically to God. And he didn't have to be under the influence to do that. And so now you don't need intoxicants, you don't need any substance to help you escape. You have, an escape that's with you all the time, and it's, it's natural. So, I think that's one of the, like you said, and, and then, for people, it may not be necessarily spirituality, but they will need, in order to escape the grips and the clutches of alcoholism or substance abuse, they need to have a substitute escape that's going to be real and it's going to be permanent. It's going to be something that they can turn to and draw on at any time. It's going to be there. Otherwise, alcohol and substance abuse, that's always going to be their go-to thing, because they want to, they want to get out of something, and that's why they turn to, alcohol and substance abuse. Maybe if, like you said, if they have real, loving relationships, then those relationships will fill the void, and they would need alcohol, they would need substance abuse,
Yeah. That's why Mutah's story is so inspirational, right? He found the strength within himself to actually face reality. Mm-hmm. That's something that a lot of people who are, having issues with substance abuse or alcoholism, that's something that they don't have yet, right? Exactly. So seeing him on his journey, for a person like that, but even again, all kinds of people. Again, this book is for every kind of person. But for those people specifically, they could be like, okay, well, he did it, and look what he went through. Maybe I could do it too, right? This is something that is not impossible. Somebody else did it, so I can do it too. What one man can do, I can do too. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's also, just to add on to that, I would also say it's sort of, it's the kind of acceptance of love, man. And that's, I think, if anything, my sort of understanding of mental illness, especially when it kind of comes to, not so much anxiety, but when it comes to depression, the kind of different personality disorders, is that at bottom, they're all sort of a deficit of love, or a deficit of a sense of being lovable. And if you look at the story of Mu, if we could kind of find, let's say, a major theme in it, I would say it's sort of in the beginning, well, not in the beginning, because I don't want to, obviously when his parents were still alive, I'm sure he didn't feel this. But somewhere down the line after they passed away, right, there was a sense of like, oh, I'm unlovable and I'm worthless. Like, screw my life, right? I might as well just do whatever because nobody cares. I don't care. And then it kind of went down to the point where like, oh shit, like maybe I do have some value. Maybe I do have something to offer, especially these random people who don't know me and who are showering me with affection. Maybe God wants something different from me. Maybe my life was meant to have been something else, right? Maybe I was supposed to have sort of put a message out into the world, and maybe I was supposed to have helped inspire people through my story. And just sort of the thing that ties the book together is pretty much the idea that my life is meaningful. That in the end, what Mood, I think, found out, and I mean, obviously, not that much of a spoiler. I mean, we kind of, anybody who knows Mood knows that he feels like life is meaningful, and his life is meaningful. So, but the thing is, like, what's so cool about it, it's sort of a journey and a kind of, I guess, a how-to or a guide. How does a person, through all of the tragedy, eventually find meaning, not only in life, but obviously find meaning within themselves and find value within themselves? And that's what made the story so poignant to me.
Exactly. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Glad you got all that from it.
Absolutely, man. All right. So, yeah, so this is such a great interview, man. So before we wrap up, Alan, any final questions or thoughts before we go?
It's amazing. It's already an hour.
I know, right? Yeah. We breezed
time
through
flew.
Chilling.
But yeah, if out of curiosity, when is the book actually coming out?
So it's scheduled. The ebook is scheduled to come out next Friday. If there's any changes, that we'll let everybody know. And it's going to be released in phases. So we have phase 1, which will be the ebook and the audiobook. And then, due to, just a lot of different logistical things, we weren't able to get we're still trying to get the print version and the hard version out. So that will be phase 2. But yeah, phase 1 is the ebook and the audiobook out hopefully by next Friday.
Cool.
Okay.
Cool. I could probably find something like that on like Amazon or something, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Amazon, Kobo, Lulu, Barnes and Nobles. Yeah, it's on our it's on my Instagram, on Mutah's Instagram, and also on the book's Instagram. At Life is Raw Outlaw, and then at Sulaiman Jenkins and at Mutah Beale, you can find all information.
Yeah. And where can we find you guys on Twitter?
On Twitter, Mutah, I think it's at Mutah Napoleon.
Yep.
I have to check that. But me, I'm saying at Sulaiman Jenkins.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much for coming on, man. I'm so excited to release this interview. I can't wait.
No problem, man. Anytime.
All right.
Yeah, no problem, man. Appreciate
all
it,
right.
man. It's been a pleasure, and I'm glad you guys enjoyed the book.
Absolutely, man. So we'll be in touch soon, man.
Have a good one.
No problem. Sounds good.
All right. So that was awesome.
That was
a little shaky there. I'm always, when I let the guests go, but it's okay.
You gotta be patient, man.
Well, all right. So if you guys want to follow us at Seize the Moment Podcast on Facebook and on Instagram, and at Seize_podcast on Twitter. Like, subscribe, hit the bell.
Mm-hmm. And then you can also find us at the O4L Online Network at o4lonlinenetwork.com. You can find us under the STM podcast section, and also follow our guy Vegas Media Designs at Instagram, who pretty much takes care of all of the wonderful visuals for our show.
All right. Thank you guys so much for watching, and look forward to next week's episode.